The National Electrical Code typically requires that electrical receptacles be accessible for maintenance, repair, and replacement. The installation of shelves that completely cover and obstruct the receptacles would likely violate this code requirement. Inaccessible receptacles could pose a safety hazard if they malfunction. Overheated or damaged receptacles could cause electrical fires or shocks. If the receptacles or wiring need to be serviced, it would be extremely difficult or impossible to access them without removing the shelves. This could lead to costly and inconvenient repairs. If the receptacles or shelves fail, the retailer or manufacturer may deny warranty coverage due to the improper installation. In the event of an electrical fire or other electrical accident, the insurance company could potentially deny coverage if they determine that the inaccessible receptacles contributed to the incident. The local code enforcement agency should be notified of the situation. They can inspect the installation and determine if it meets code requirements. Take photographs and write a detailed description of the situation, including the location of the receptacles, the type of shelves installed, and the lack of labeling on the fixtures or cords. A licensed electrician can assess the situation and provide professional recommendations on how to address the issue safely and in compliance with electrical codes. If it is determined that the receptacles must remain inaccessible, a lockout-tagout procedure should be implemented to prevent unauthorized access and ensure that the receptacles are not energized. This procedure should be reviewed and approved by a qualified electrician. Inform the property owner or building manager of the situation and the potential code and safety hazards associated with it. Consider several problems with this kind of installation. Firstly, the National Electrical Code, or NEC, mandates that electrical receptacles must be accessible for maintenance, repairs, and eventual replacement. Shelves that are installed in a manner that completely cover and obstruct these receptacles are a potential code violation. Secondly, inaccessible receptacles could create a significant safety hazard. If a receptacle malfunctions, perhaps due to overheating or damage, it could potentially lead to electrical fires or even shocks, putting people at risk. Thirdly, if the receptacles or their associated wiring require servicing, accessing them becomes extremely difficult, if not completely impossible, without first removing the shelving. This could result in costly and time-consuming repairs. Fourthly, warranty issues could arise. If the receptacles or the shelving units themselves fail, the retailer or the manufacturer might deny warranty coverage, arguing that the improper installation caused the failure. Fifthly, there are potential insurance implications. Should an electrical fire or any other electrical accident occur, the insurance company could potentially deny coverage if they determine that the inaccessible receptacles played a role in the incident. It is also crucial to consider recommended actions in response to this situation. One recommended action is to contact the authority having jurisdiction, often abbreviated as AHJ. The local code enforcement agency should be informed about the situation, as they have the authority to inspect the installation and determine whether it complies with the relevant code requirements. It's also important to thoroughly document the issue. Take detailed photographs and create a written description of the situation. This documentation should include the precise location of the receptacles, the type of shelves that have been installed, and the absence of any labeling on the fixtures or cords. Another recommended action is to consult with a qualified, licensed electrician. A licensed electrician can thoroughly assess the situation and provide professional recommendations on how to address the issue in a manner that is both safe and compliant with all applicable electrical codes. Also, consider a lockout/tagout procedure. If it is determined that the receptacles must remain inaccessible, a lockout/tagout procedure should be implemented to prevent unauthorized access and ensure that the receptacles are not energized. This procedure should be reviewed and approved by a qualified electrician. Finally, notify the property owner or building manager of the situation and the potential code and safety hazards associated with it. The NEC is very specific regarding access to electrical components. Article 100 defines accessible as, when applied to wiring methods, as capable of being removed or exposed without damaging the building structure or finish or not permanently closed in by the structure or finish of the building. And accessible, when applied to equipment, as admitting close approach because not guarded by locked doors, elevation, or other permanent means. The definition makes it clear that electrical components should be readily available for inspection, maintenance, and repair. The installation described, with receptacles completely hidden behind fixed shelving, clearly violates this principle. This lack of accessibility poses several problems. Troubleshooting becomes significantly more difficult. If a circuit breaker trips or a receptacle fails, diagnosing the problem requires dismantling the shelving, adding time and complexity to what should be a simple task. Repairs are similarly hampered. Replacing a faulty receptacle or addressing wiring issues becomes a major undertaking, potentially requiring specialized tools and skills. Safety is also a major concern. Hidden electrical problems can go unnoticed for extended periods. Overloaded circuits, loose connections, or damaged wiring can create fire hazards that are difficult to detect until it's too late. The lack of ventilation around the receptacles can also contribute to overheating, further increasing the risk. From a code enforcement perspective, inspectors rely on visual inspections to identify potential hazards. When receptacles are hidden, it becomes impossible to verify that the installation meets code requirements. This can lead to unsafe conditions that persist for years. Article 406.4 covers the installation of receptacles, addressing issues such as proper mounting, grounding, and protection. These requirements cannot be effectively verified if the receptacles are concealed. The cord and plug-connected luminaires introduce additional concerns. Article 400 addresses flexible cords and cables, specifying requirements for their use, ampacity, and protection. Without any labeling on the fixtures or cords, it's impossible to determine whether they are properly rated for the application. This can lead to overloading, overheating, and potential fire hazards. The fact that the shelving is screwed to the wall and to each other further complicates the situation. This creates a permanent installation that is difficult to modify or remove. If the receptacles need to be accessed, it may be necessary to damage the shelving, adding to the cost and inconvenience. The absence of labeling on the fixtures and cords is a clear violation of NEC requirements. Article 110.3 requires that equipment be installed and used in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and that it be properly identified for its intended use. Without labeling, it's impossible to verify that the fixtures and cords are suitable for the application. In these situations, there are several steps that can be taken to address the problem. The first step is to document the situation thoroughly. Take photographs of the installation, noting the location of the receptacles, the type of shelving, and the absence of labeling. This documentation will be essential when communicating with the AHJ and other stakeholders. The second step is to contact the AHJ. The local code enforcement agency has the authority to inspect the installation and determine whether it meets code requirements. They can issue a notice of violation and require the retailer to correct the problem. The third step is to consult with a qualified electrician. A licensed electrician can assess the situation and provide recommendations on how to bring the installation into compliance with the NEC. This may involve relocating the receptacles, modifying the shelving, or replacing the fixtures and cords. If the receptacles must remain inaccessible, a lockout-tagout procedure should be implemented. This will prevent unauthorized access to the receptacles and ensure that they are not energized during maintenance or repair. The lockout-tagout procedure should comply with OSHA requirements and should be reviewed and approved by a qualified electrician. The property owner or building manager should also be notified of the situation. They need to be aware of the potential code violations and safety hazards associated with the installation. They may also be liable for any damages or injuries that result from the unsafe conditions. Several sections of the NEC are applicable to this situation, including 110.3, 400, 406.4, and Article 100. Article 110.3 covers examination, identification, installation, and use of equipment, requiring that equipment be installed and used in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and that it be properly identified for its intended use. Article 400 addresses flexible cords and cables, specifying requirements for their use, ampacity, and protection. Article 406.4 covers the installation of receptacles, addressing issues such as proper mounting, grounding, and protection. Article 100 defines accessible, clarifying that electrical components should be readily available for inspection, maintenance, and repair. In addition to the NEC, other codes and standards may also be applicable depending on the specific location and type of occupancy. These may include local building codes, fire codes, and accessibility standards. In conclusion, the installation of shelves that completely cover and obstruct electrical receptacles is a serious code violation and safety hazard. It violates the NEC requirement for accessibility, creates potential fire and shock hazards, and complicates maintenance and repairs. To address this problem, it's essential to document the situation thoroughly, contact the AHJ, consult with a qualified electrician, and implement a lockout-tagout procedure if necessary. The property owner or building manager should also be notified of the situation. By taking these steps, it's possible to bring the installation into compliance with the NEC and ensure the safety of building occupants. Consider also that the luminaires are cord and plug connected. This means they are considered portable or temporary lighting and should be treated as such. However, the fact that the shelving is fixed in place raises questions about whether the luminaires are being used in a manner consistent with their intended purpose. Portable luminaires are typically designed for temporary use and are not intended to be permanently installed. The NEC does permit the use of cord and plug connected equipment in certain situations, but it also imposes restrictions to ensure safety. For example, Section 400.7 specifies the types of equipment that are permitted to be connected by flexible cords, and Section 400.8 lists the uses that are not permitted. The use of cord and plug connected luminaires in a fixed shelving installation may violate these restrictions. The absence of labeling on the fixtures and cords also raises concerns about their suitability for the application. Without labeling, it's impossible to determine whether the luminaires are listed for the intended use and whether the cords are properly rated for the load. This can lead to overloading, overheating, and potential fire hazards. The fact that the receptacles are inaccessible also complicates the situation. If a luminaire malfunctions or the cord becomes damaged, it may be difficult or impossible to disconnect it without removing the shelving. This can create a safety hazard for anyone attempting to perform maintenance or repairs. The installation of the shelving itself also raises concerns. If the shelving is not properly secured to the wall, it could collapse and damage the electrical wiring or create a tripping hazard. The shelving should be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and should be designed to support the weight of the luminaires and any other items that are stored on the shelves. The fact that the shelving is being installed by the book retailer rather than a qualified electrician or contractor also raises concerns about the quality of the installation. The book retailer may not be familiar with the NEC requirements for electrical installations and may not have the necessary skills or experience to perform the work safely. The electrical contractor and general contractor should be aware of the situation and should take steps to ensure that the shelving is installed in a safe and code-compliant manner. This may involve coordinating with the book retailer, providing guidance and training, or inspecting the installation after it is completed. The authority having jurisdiction should also be notified of the situation. The AHJ can inspect the installation and determine whether it meets code requirements. If the installation is found to be unsafe or non-compliant, the AHJ can issue a notice of violation and require the book retailer to correct the problem. The potential liability associated with this installation should also be considered. If someone is injured or property is damaged as a result of the unsafe conditions, the book retailer, the property owner, the electrical contractor, and the general contractor could all be held liable. It is important to take steps to mitigate these risks by ensuring that the installation is safe and code compliant. To reiterate, the installation of shelves that completely cover and obstruct electrical receptacles is a serious code violation and safety hazard. It violates the NEC requirement for accessibility, creates potential fire and shock hazards, and complicates maintenance and repairs. The use of cord and plug connected luminaires in a fixed shelving installation also raises concerns about their suitability for the application and the safety of the installation. To address these problems, it's essential to document the situation thoroughly, contact the AHJ, consult with a qualified electrician, implement a lockout-tagout procedure if necessary, and notify the property owner or building manager. It is also important to ensure that the shelving is properly installed and secured to the wall, and that the luminaires and cords are properly labelled and rated for the application. All parties involved should be aware of the potential liability associated with this installation and should take steps to mitigate these risks. This analysis has primarily focused on the electrical aspects of the situation. However, it's important to consider other factors that may be relevant, such as the structural integrity of the shelving, the fire resistance of the materials used, and the accessibility of the space for people with disabilities. A comprehensive assessment of the installation should take all of these factors into account. The situation also highlights the importance of communication and coordination among all parties involved in a construction project. The electrical contractor, the general contractor, the book retailer, and the property owner should all be working together to ensure that the installation is safe and code compliant. Clear lines of communication and well-defined roles and responsibilities are essential for preventing problems and resolving issues quickly and efficiently. The problem described also underscores the importance of regular inspections and maintenance. Electrical systems should be inspected periodically to identify potential hazards and ensure that they are functioning properly. Maintenance should be performed as needed to repair damaged or worn components and to prevent future problems. Regular inspections and maintenance can help to prevent electrical fires, shocks, and other hazards. The issue further demonstrates the importance of training and education. Electrical contractors, electricians, and other workers who are involved in electrical installations should be properly trained and educated on the NEC requirements and unsafe work practices. Training and education can help to prevent errors and to ensure that electrical installations are performed safely and correctly. The situation underscores the importance of following manufacturer's instructions. Equipment should be installed and used in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. The manufacturer's instructions provide important information about the proper use of the equipment, its limitations, and any safety precautions that should be taken. Failure to follow the manufacturer's instructions can lead to equipment failure, safety hazards, and code violations. The specific facts and circumstances of this situation may vary, depending on the specific location, the type of occupancy, and the applicable codes and standards. However, the general principles and recommendations outlined in this analysis should be applicable to most similar situations. It is always best to consult with a qualified electrician and the AHJ to ensure that electrical installations are safe and code compliant. In summary, this situation presents a complex set of challenges that require careful attention to detail and a thorough understanding of the NEC requirements. By taking the steps outlined in this analysis, it's possible to address the problems and ensure that the installation is safe and code compliant.